Mark's heart stopped when he saw his boss, Victoria Reynolds, watching him from across the crowded restaurant. He'd been caught staring at the kissing couples around them during what was supposed to be a strictly professional dinner meeting, but what made his blood run cold wasn't her noticing. It was what she did next. Victoria, the notoriously ice-cold CEO, who had never shown a hint of personal interest in her employees, leaned across the table with a look he'd never seen before and whispered, "You could have that too, you know." Then she placed a small velvet box between them that unmistakably held a ring. This wasn't just his boss making an inappropriate advance. This was Victoria Reynolds, the woman who'd fired his wife from the same company 3 years ago, just weeks before Sarah's cancer diagnosis. The woman whose ruthless business decisions had left Mark a widowed single father struggling to provide for his daughter on a middle manager's salary. The same Victoria who now controlled whether he received the promotion that would finally give 8-year-old Emma the stability she deserved. And here she was, apparently proposing some kind of arrangement that could either save or destroy everything he'd worked for. "I don't understand," Mark stammered, his fingers hovering over the box without touching it. Victoria's piercing blue eyes held as her long blonde hair, cascading over shoulders that carried the weight of running a billion-dollar company. "Open it," she commanded softly. "Then you'll understand why I've been watching you all these years. The mystery of her words sent a chill through him. What game was she playing? And why now? When the custody battle with his late wife's parents was reaching its critical phase, the restaurant around them seemed to fade away as Mark finally reached for the box. His hands trembled slightly. This moment would change everything. He could feel it. If you're feeling the tension in this story, hit that like button now, and let me know in the comments if you've ever faced an impossible choice. Mark opened the box and froze. Inside wasn't a ring at all, but a small, golden key attached to a familiar keychain, a miniature photo frame containing a picture of Sarah, his late wife, smiling from her desk at Reynolds Enterprises, a desk she'd occupied before Victoria had personally terminated her position. "That's impossible," Mark whispered, his voice barely audible over the ambient restaurant noise. This was in Sarah's personal effects. Her parents took everything after the funeral. Victoria's perfect composure cracked, slightly revealing something vulnerable beneath her polished exterior. "Not everything," she said. "There are things about your wife you don't know, Mark. Things about why she really left the company. Things I've protected you and Emma from for 3 years." Mark's mind raced. The promotion interview scheduled for tomorrow suddenly seemed like a setup. Was this all an elaborate scheme to silence him about something? Or was Victoria genuinely trying to help him? The custody case against Sarah's wealthy parents hinged on his financial stability, which Victoria controlled entirely. "Why now?" he demanded, his protective instincts flaring. "What do you want from me?" Victoria's eyes darted to the window where a black sedan had just pulled up. Her composed expression faltered for just a second. "They're here," she whispered. "I thought we had more time." "Who's here?" Mark turned to look, but Victoria's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. "Don't look," she hissed. "Listen carefully. Sarah didn't have cancer. Mark, that was the cover story. She was working with me on something that could have changed everything. Something dangerous. And now they found the final piece, Emma." The world tilted beneath Mark. Everything he thought he knew about his wife's illness, her death, the past 3 years of grieving and rebuilding, all of it suddenly stood on unstable ground. If what Victoria was saying was true, then his daughter was in danger. If it wasn't true, then his boss was playing an incomprehensibly cruel game. "I need you to trust me," Victoria said, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. "We need to leave now." Through the kitchen, Mark's mind whirled with questions, but one thing was clear. He couldn't risk Emma's safety. "My daughter is at home with the babysitter," he said, already reaching for his phone. Victoria shook her head. "No calls. They'll be monitoring. Emma is safe for now. I sent my personal security team to your house 20 minutes ago, but we need to move." As they rose from the table, Victoria's hand brushed against his, the unexpected contact sending an electric current through him. For a moment, beneath the fear and confusion, Mark felt something he hadn't experienced since Sarah's connection. This woman who had been his adversary for so long suddenly felt like his only ally in a world gone mad. If you're as shocked by this twist as Mark is, drop a comment below with your theories about what's really going on and subscribe to see how this unfolds. You won't want to miss what happens next. The kitchen staff barely glanced at them as Victoria led Mark through with the confidence of someone who owned the place, which he realized with a start she probably did. The restaurant was likely one of countless Reynolds Enterprises holdings. How much of his life had been subtly controlled by this woman without him realizing? "My car's in the alley," Victoria said as they pushed through the back exit into the cool night air. Her heels clicked purposefully on the pavement as she led him to a sleek silver Aston Martin that seemed at odds with her carefully cultivated corporate. "Get in," she commanded, sliding behind the wheel. As Mark hesitated, she added softly, "Please." For Emma, the mention of his daughter was all it took. Mark climbed in and Victoria accelerated away from the restaurant with practiced precision. In the confined space of the luxury car, he became acutely aware of her perfume, something expensive but subtle that reminded him of summer rain. "Start talking," he demanded as they merged onto the highway. What did Sarah really do for Reynolds Enterprises? What does any of this have to do with Emma? Victoria's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Your wife wasn't in marketing, Mark. That was her cover. She was part of a specialized security team investigating corporate espionage. We discovered that someone was selling proprietary medical research, breakthrough cancer treatments to foreign competitors." Mark struggled to reconcile this information with the woman he'd been married to for 10 years. Sarah wasn't a spy. She was a graphic designer who made brochures and website layouts. She was both, Victoria said simply. "The best undercover operatives always are." She was brilliant, Mark. She traced the leak to someone high in the company, someone with access to everything. Victoria paused, checking the rear-view mirror. "Someone like me." The implication hung in the air between them. "You fired her because she suspected you." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "I fired her to protect her. We staged the dismissal to throw off suspicion while she dug deeper. The cancer diagnosis was part of her cover, a reason for her to disappear from public view while investigating. But someone figured it out. The car accident wasn't an accident, Mark." The world seemed to tilt again. "You're saying my wife was murdered?" The grief he'd carefully managed for 3 years suddenly transformed into something raw and jagged. "Yes," Victoria said quietly. "And I've spent 3 years trying to find out who did it while keeping you and Emma safe." "Why would Emma be in danger?" Mark demanded, fear clawing at his throat. Victoria took a sharp exit off the highway. "Because Sarah hid the evidence. And we recently discovered that before she died, she encoded the encryption key into Emma's favorite stuffed animal, the one she never sleeps without." Mark's mind flashed to Benny, the worn teddy bear Emma had clutched every night since Sarah's death. The bear Sarah had given her on her 5th birthday, just months before that. "Diagnosis. That's insane," he whispered. But even as he said it, pieces began falling into place. Sarah's late nights at the office, her distraction in the months before her firing the way she'd insisted. Emma never lose that particular teddy bear. Victoria pulled into an underground parking garage beneath an unmarked building. "We're here," she said, killing the engine. In the sudden silence, she turned to face him fully. The harsh fluorescent lights cast shadows across her face, highlighting the vulnerability that had replaced her usual corporate mask. "I need you to understand something, Mark. I didn't just watch you because of the investigation or to protect you. I watched because Sarah made me promise to take care of you both if anything happened to her." And somewhere along the way, as she trailed off, looking away. "You what?" Mark prompted, suddenly aware of how close they were in the confines of the car. Victoria met his eyes again, her gaze unwavering. "I fell in love with the man my best." Operative couldn't stop talking about the man who made her eyes light up every time she mentioned him. The man who's raised their daughter with such devotion, despite everything. The confession hung between them, impossible and yet somehow not entirely surprising. Mark had always felt Victoria's eyes on him at company functions, had always wondered about the special attention she paid to his department. The way his promotion had been fast-tracked despite his frequent need for family-related flexibility. If this revelation has you shocked, hit that like button and subscribe now. The truth about Emma's teddy bear and what happens next will leave you speechless. Before Mark could respond, Victoria's phone buzzed. Her expression hardened as she read the message. "They've moved faster than we anticipated. We need to get to Emma now." The security team Victoria had sent reported that 2 men in unmarked vehicles were surveilling Mark's house. As they rushed through the building, apparently a private security headquarters for Reynolds Enterprises, Mark struggled to process everything. His wife had been a corporate spy. His boss was in love with him and his daughter was in danger because of a teddy bear. "I still don't understand why you didn't tell me any of this sooner," Mark said as they entered what looked like a tactical operations room. Victoria handed him a bulletproof vest. "Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was a manipulative boss trying to seduce a vulnerable widower with an elaborate lie?" The question struck uncomfortably close to what he'd initially thought in the restaurant. "I don't know," he admitted. "Exactly," Victoria said, strapping on her own vest with practiced ease that further challenged his perception of her. "And I couldn't risk you rejecting my help in putting yourself and Emma in danger. I had to wait until I had proof." The key, Mark realized. What does it open? A safety deposit box containing Sarah's evidence. Enough to identify and prosecute whoever is behind this, but it's useless without the encryption codes in Emma's bear. Victoria checked a sleek handgun before holstering it beneath her jacket. Another surprising revelation about his supposedly corporate-focused boss. Mark's protective instincts flared. "I'm not using my daughter as bait. We're not," Victoria assured him. "We're extracting her and the bear. Then we're disappearing until this is over." She hesitated, then added softly, "If you'll trust me, trust." Such a simple word for such an impossible request. And yet, looking at Victoria now, not as his intimidating boss, but as a woman who had apparently spent years protecting his family from the shadows, Mark found himself nodding. "For Emma," he said. Victoria's relief was palpable. "For Emma," she agreed. Then, with a hint of her usual commanding presence, she added, "And maybe when this is over, for us too." The operation to extract Emma went smoothly, almost too smoothly. Victoria's team created a diversion that drew away the surveillance vehicles, while Mark and Victoria slipped into his house through a neighbor's connecting yard. The babysitter, apparently one of Victoria's undercover security personnel, all along had Emma ready to go with a small backpack of essentials. "Daddy," Emma exclaimed when she saw him, her small arms wrapping around his waist. Ms. Victoria said, "We're going on an adventure." Mark knelt to his daughter's level, searching her face. Sarah's eyes looking back at him. Had his wife known she was putting their daughter in danger, or had she believed the bear was the safest place to hide, her secrets protected by a child's love? "That's right, sweetheart," he said, forcing a smile. "Is Benny ready for an adventure too?" Emma nodded, solemnly, clutching the worn teddy bear. "He's a little scared, but I told him you'd protect us." Mark's throat tightened. "Always," he promised, as they made their escape through the back door to a waiting SUV. Mark caught Victoria watching them with an expression that transcended professional concern. For a moment, he glimpsed what might be possible after all this was over. A second chance at the family he'd thought forever lost. The safe house was a lakeside cabin several hours from the city, isolated and secure, as Emma finally drifted to sleep in one of the bedrooms, exhausted from the excitement and late hour. Mark and Victoria sat at the kitchen table with Benny the bear between them. "We need to find the encryption codes," Victoria said gently. "It might mean damaging the beer." Mark nodded, though the thought of destroying one of Emma's last connections to Sarah pained him. "She'll understand if it keeps her safe." Victoria's hand covered his, warm and reassuring. "We'll get her a new one. The best teddy bear money can buy." "It won't be the same," Mark said, turning his hand to intertwine their fingers without fully understanding why. "No," Victoria agreed softly, "nothing ever is. But different doesn't have to mean worse." Their eyes met across the table, the air between them charged with possibility and the shared understanding of loss. For the first time since Sarah died, Mark felt the walls around his heart beginning to crumble. If you're feeling the emotional connection building between these two, give this video a like and share it with someone who believes in second chances. The moment was interrupted by Victoria's phone. Her expression darkened as she read the message. "The security team at your house was attacked. They're fine, but whoever is after the bear knows we have it." Mark's protective instincts surged. How could they have found us so quickly? Victoria's eyes widened with sudden realization. There must be a tracker in the bear itself. Sarah would have wanted a way to locate it if Emma ever lost it. They moved quickly, Victoria retrieving a scanner from her equipment bag while Mark gently examined the bear. Sure enough, a small device was sewn into Benny's left foot. "We need to move," Victoria said urgently. "They could be tracking us right now." But as they began gathering their things, headlights swept across the cabin windows. "Too late. Take Emma out the back," Victoria commanded, drawing her weapon. "There's a boat at the dock. The keys are under the seat." "I'm not leaving you," Mark protested. Victoria's expression softened for just a moment. "This is what I do, Mark, what Sarah did too. Protect the people we love." Before he could respond to the implication of her words, she added firmly, "Go now." Heart pounding, Mark rushed to Emma's room, scooping up his sleeping daughter and the bear. As he slipped out the back door into the darkness, he heard the first crash of someone breaking into the cabin, followed by Victoria's commanding voice, identifying herself as armed security. The night air was cool against his face as he ran toward the dock, Emma stirring against his shoulder. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered, though nothing felt okay at all. "We're still on our adventure." The boat was where Victoria had said, a small motorboat with an outboard engine. Mark settled Emma on the seat, tucking Benny securely beside her before feeling under the seat for the keys. His fingers closed around cold metal just as gunshots echoed from the cabin. "Victoria?" Mark froze, torn between his daughter's safety and the woman who had risked everything to protect them. The woman who might already be. No, he couldn't think that way. "Daddy, what's that noise?" Emma asked, now fully awake and frightened. "Just fireworks, sweetheart," he lied, his mind racing. He couldn't leave Victoria, but he couldn't risk Emma either. The decision was made for him when a figure emerged from the shadows of the dock. Mark tensed, ready to defend his daughter at any cost until he recognized Victoria's silhouette. "Start the boat," she called softly, limping slightly as she hurried toward them. Relief flooded through him as he turned the key, the engine sputtering to life. Victoria jumped aboard just as more figures appeared at the cabin's back door. "Go," she urged, and Mark pushed the throttle forward, the boat surging away from the dock as bullets splashed into the water behind them. "Are you hit?" he demanded, noticing the way Victoria held her side. "Just a graze," she said dismissively, though her face was pale in the moonlight. "Keep going. There's another safe house across the lake." Emma, woody-eyed and clutching Benny, looked between them. "Miss Victoria, are you a superhero like in my books?" Despite everything, Victoria smiled. "No, sweetheart. Just someone who made a promise to your mom." As they sped across the dark water, Mark kept one hand on the throttle and reached for Victoria's with the other. She looked surprised but didn't pull away. "Thank you," he said simply, "for keeping your promise to Sarah." Victoria's fingers tightened around his. "I always keep my promises, Mark, always." The second safe house was smaller, but more secure, built into the side of a hill with a view of the lake. As Mark tucked an exhausted Emma back into bed, Victoria set up a portable security system and finally allowed herself to properly bandage the bullet graze on her side. "We need to examine the bear," she said when Mark returned to the main room. "The tracker was just confirmation that there's something important inside." Mark nodded, though the thought of cutting open Emma's beloved toy still pained him. "She'll be devastated. We'll fix him afterward," Victoria promised. "I have people who can make him good as new." With careful precision, they examined the teddy bear, eventually discovering an unusual seam along Benny's back. When they opened it, they found a small memory chip sewn into the stuffing. "This is it," Victoria breathed, her professional demeanor momentarily giving way to excitement. "Sarah's evidence." Mark stared at the tiny chip that had cost his wife her life and now threatened his daughter. "What happens now?" Victoria inserted the chip into a specialized reader. "Now we find out who killed Sarah and make them pay." The encryption codes revealed a shocking truth. The person selling Reynolds Enterprises cancer research was none other than Victoria's second-in-command, James Harrington, the man who had been positioning himself to take over the company for years. The man who had personally overseen Sarah's department, the man who had attended Sarah's funeral with apparent grief. "I trusted him," Victoria whispered, her composure finally cracking. "He was my mentor." Mark watched as the strong, confident woman he'd always known his boss to be struggled with this betrayal. Without thinking, he reached out, pulling her into his arms. Victoria stiffened momentarily before melting against him, her head resting against his chest. "Sarah trusted me, too," she murmured. "I failed her." "No," Mark said firmly. "You protected us. You kept your promise." Victoria looked up at him, vulnerability and determination wearing in her eyes. "It's not over yet. Harrington won't stop until he has this evidence destroyed and all witnesses eliminated." "What's our next move?" Mark asked, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, how right it felt to be planning their future, even a dangerous one, together. "We take this to the FBI," Victoria said. "I have contacts who can ensure it's handled properly." "But first," she hesitated, then continued softly, "first, I need you to know something. If you're invested in Mark and Victoria's journey, hit that like button now and subscribe to see how this emotional story concludes." "What is it?" Mark prompted. When she fell silent, Victoria took a deep breath. "When this is over, when you and Emma are safe, I'll understand if you want nothing more to do with me. I've turned your life upside down, put you both in danger, saved us." Mark interrupted. "You've saved us, Victoria, and when this is over," he paused, surprised by the certainty he felt. "When this is over, I'd like the chance to know the real you, not my boss, not Sarah's friend, but you." The smile that transformed Victoria's face made her more beautiful than he'd ever seen her. "I'd like that too." Their moment was interrupted by a small voice from the bedroom doorway. "Daddy, Benny feels funny." They turned to find Emma, clutching her teddy bear, now hastily sewn back together. Mark knelt down to her level. "Benny helped us solve a mystery, sweetheart. Like a detective bear." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Like Mommy used to solve mysteries at work?" Mark exchanged a startled glance with Victoria. "What do you mean, Em? Mommy told me she was a detective at work finding bad guys, but it was a secret." Emma hugged Benny tighter. She said, "If anything bad ever happened, Benny would protect me until the princess came." "The princess?" Mark repeated, confused. Victoria stepped forward, kneeling beside them. "Your mom called me the ice princess at work," she explained gently, "because I was always so formal." Emma studied Victoria with solemn eyes. "Are you the princess who was supposed to help us?" Victoria nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Yes, Emma. I promised your mom I would take care of you and your dad if she couldn't." Emma considered this, then asked with a child's directness, "Do you love my daddy like Mommy did?" The question hung in the air between them. Mark felt his heart pounding as Victoria's eyes met his, no longer hiding what she felt. I think I could, she answered honestly. If he and you would let me try. Emma nodded as if this made perfect sense. Mommy said, sometimes hearts can grow bigger to love more people. She said if she had to go to heaven, she wanted our hearts to keep growing. Mark felt tears prick his eyes at this revelation. This final gift from Sarah, permission to move forward, permission to find happiness again. The next morning, Victoria's FBI contacts arrived, taking possession of the evidence and placing them under protective custody. Within days, James Harrington and his network of corporate spies were arrested. The case made headlines. Reynolds Enterprises CEO uncovers international espionage ring, honors fallen whistleblower. 3 months later, with the trials underway and their lives slowly returning to normal, Mark stood in his backyard watching Emma show Victoria how to make proper mud pies. His boss, no, not just his boss anymore, laughed as Emma decorated her creation with dandelions. Her usually perfect blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, designer clothes replaced by jeans and a teat shirt. Victoria looked up, catching him watching them. The smile she gave him was radiant, open, in a way he never would have believed possible from the ice princess he'd known for years. Later, after Emma was asleep, they sat on the porch swing, Victoria's head resting on his shoulder, as they watched the stars emerge. I never thanked you properly, Mark said, breaking the comfortable silence. For what? For that night at the restaurant. For saying you could have that too. You know, for making me believe it was possible to find love again. Victoria turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. I meant it then, and I mean it now. You deserve happiness, Mark. We all do. As he leaned in to kiss her, Mark felt the last pieces of his broken heart finally healing, not replacing what he'd lost with Sarah, but growing, just as Emma had said, to make room for new love alongside the old. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe for more emotional journeys that remind us second chances are always possible. Share with someone who needs to hear that after loss, love can find its way back when we least expect it. In the soft evening light, with his daughter sleeping safely inside and Victoria's hand in his, Mark finally understood what Sarah had known all along. That love wasn't finite, that hearts could expand, and that sometimes the most unexpected people could help us find our way back to happiness. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would be challenges ahead as they built their new family. But for the first time in 3 years, Mark looked to the future with hope instead of just determination. Victoria had given him that gift along with her heart. You could have that too, she had said that night at the restaurant. And now, against all odds, he